Begin. The sun was barely a smudge of orange on the prairie horizon when Alara's day truly began. Inside her small, sturdy home, the air was already thick with the sweet, yeasty smell of rising dough. Flour dusted every surface, a fine white blanket over the rough-hewn table in Alara's strong, capable hands. She kneaded the dough with a rhythm born of years, a gentle pushing and folding that spoke of deep care. Each loaf was more than just food. It was a promise, a comfort to the scattered families across the valley. As she worked, a flicker of something more than flour-dusted devotion crossed her face. Her nimble fingers, so adept at coaxing life from simple ingredients, also knew secrets. Sometimes, when a special message needed sending, a tiny, almost invisible mark would find its way into the bread's crust. A dot here, a dash there, a silent conversation hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right eyes to find it. The heat of the oven, usually a symbol of warmth and sustenance, would then seal not just the bread, but a message that could mean everything. And begin. Beyond the warm comfort of her kitchen, the prairie stretched endlessly, a vast canvas of sun-baked earth and whispering grasses. The quiet of it was a balm, broken only by the distant whinny of a horse or the creak of a wagon wheel. Alara knew this land, felt its rhythms in her bones. She'd seen the slow, patient work of building a life here, the way neighbors helped each other raise barns and mend fences. The smell of dust, ancient and ever-present, mingled with the faint scent of leather from a passing rider's tack. She often stood by her window, watching the horizon, her gaze sweeping over the familiar dips and rises. It wasn't just idle looking, it was a silent vigil. Alara felt a deep, quiet duty to this land and its people. Her bread fed their bodies, but her hidden skill was meant to protect their lives. She was a silent guardian, a watchful eye in a world where danger could appear as quickly as a summer storm. The peace of the prairie was precious, hard-won, and Alara was determined to keep it that way, one carefully baked loaf at a time. And begin. But the quiet peace of the prairie, so carefully guarded by Alara, was not as solid as it seemed. Whispers, like dry leaves scuttling across the dusty ground, began to reach her ears. They spoke of trouble brewing in the Badlands, a place of jagged rocks and hidden canyons where lawless men found refuge. A gang, meaner and bolder than any before, was said to be gathering, their eyes set on the fertile valley and the small towns that dotted it. Alara heard these tales from the few travelers who passed by, and from the farmers who came to her for bread, their faces etched with worry. The stories grew with each telling. Stolen cattle, burned homesteads, and now, talk of a full-scale raid on the valley itself. A cold knot of fear tightened in Alara's stomach. Her baking, her quiet vigilance, felt small against such a rising tide of darkness. She knew her secret skill might soon be tested in a way she had only ever imagined. The dust on the horizon seemed to thicken, not just from the wind, but from the shadow of coming danger. And begin. The growing rumors of raiders pushed Alara to refine her secret art. Late one night, by the flickering light of a single oil lamp, she worked not with dough, but with a small piece of parchment and a tiny, sharp tool. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she etched delicate patterns onto the paper. These weren't random marks. They were a special code, a series of dots and dashes, short lines and long, that only one other person on the entire prairie could read. This person was Silas, the telegraph operator in town. Years ago, they had devised this system, a backup in case the telegraph lines themselves were ever cut or if a message needed to be sent without drawing suspicion. It was a simple, yet clever, way to translate Morse code into visual symbols small enough to be hidden. Alara practiced placing these tiny coded messages into small folds of dough, pressing them gently into the underside of the crust before baking. The heat would seal them in, making them almost impossible to detect by an untrained eye. Only Silas, knowing where and how to look, would be able to uncover the hidden message. Their shared secret felt like a heavy stone in her stomach, a burden of responsibility she now carried. And begin. Most mornings, Alara hitched her old mare to a small wagon, loaded with fragrant loaves, and made the dusty journey into town. The main street was little more than a wide dirt path, lined with weathered wooden buildings. The clinking of bottles from the saloon, the creak of the general store door, and the distant ring of the blacksmith's hammer were the everyday sounds. The air smelled of horse and dust, with a faint undertone of stale beer near the saloon's swinging doors. Alara greeted everyone with a warm smile, but her eyes were always busy. She watched the faces of the cowboys dismounting from their horses, the farmers haggling over prices, and the travelers passing through. She listened to snippets of conversation, searching for any new whisper, any change in the town's usual hum. Her gaze often drifted to the dark entrance of the saloon, where men sometimes spoke too loudly after too many drinks, and then to the small, clapboard telegraph office, its windows grimy. She was looking for anything out of place, any sign that the rumors from the Badlands were drawing closer. Every sale, every nod, every quiet word exchanged was a chance to gather information, to keep her community safe. And begin. The morning dawned like any other, a vast, clear sky overhead. Alara was already at her oven, the heat of familiar comfort against her skin. She glanced out the window, a habit born of her constant watchfulness. That's when she saw it. Far off, where the prairie met the hazy line of the Badlands, a smudge appeared. It wasn't a dust devil, nor was it cloud. This was darker, moving with a purpose, growing larger by the second. Her heart gave a hard thump against her ribs. It was them, the raiders. The whispers had become a chilling reality. The smudge resolved into a line of riders, horses galloping, kicking up a thick red cloud that stained the pristine blue. They rode fast, like a storm gathering, heading straight for the valley. Alara felt a cold dread, but beneath it, a fierce determination bloomed. This was the moment she had prepared for, the reason for her hidden code and careful planning. The quiet peace she so cherished was about to be shattered, and it was up to her to sound the alarm. She knew exactly what she had to do. And begin. With the sight of the raiders burned into her mind, Alara spun from the window, her movements sharp and urgent. No time for fear now, only action. She grabbed a fresh ball of dough, already prepared, her hands flying over it. She didn't just knead. She poured her frantic energy into it, shaping it with purpose. Her mind raced, translating the urgent message into the coded marks. Raiders. Valley. Now. Each tiny dot and dash was carefully pressed into a small, thin strip of dough, then tucked beneath the larger loaf's crust, hidden from all but the knowing eye. Her fingers worked with surprising speed, a blur of motion despite the tremor that ran through her. A bead of sweat trickled down her temple, but her focus remained absolute. This loaf wasn't just bread. It was hope, a desperate plea for help. She slid it into the hot oven, the familiar warmth a stark contrast to the cold fear gripping her heart. While it baked, Alara tried to steady her breathing, the scent of fresh bread mixing with the distant, faint rumble of horses. She had done her part. Now it was up to the bread and to Silas. And begin. The moment the special loaf was cool enough to handle, Alara wrapped it carefully in a clean cloth. Her usual routine of taking bread to town was impossible now. The raiders were too close. She needed a swift messenger, someone reliable. Her eyes fell on young Jed, a ranch hand who often helped with odd jobs. He was fast, and he knew the shortcuts. Jed, she called, her voice tight but steady. Take this loaf to Silas at the Telegraph office. Tell him it's from Alara, and it's urgent. Don't stop for anything. Jed, sensing the gravity in her voice, nodded, his eyes wide. He took the warm loaf, its weight comforting in his hands, and sprinted out the door, leaping onto his waiting horse. The sound of horse hooves quickly faded into the prairie wind. Alara watched him go, a prayer forming on her lips. She had put all her faith and the fate of the valley into that loaf and into Jed's quick ride. Silas was her only hope now. He was a man of few words, but sharp wits, and he understood the silent language woven into her bread. And begin. Inside the dusty, quiet telegraph office, Silas sat hunched over his keys, sending a routine message about cattle prices. The door burst open, and Jed stumbled in, breathless, thrusting a still-warm loaf of bread into his hands. "Alara sent it. Said it's urgent, Mr. Silas, real urgent." Jed gasped, before turning and running out, his horse already thundering away. Silas, a man whose life revolved around precise clicks and accurate dots and dashes, felt an immediate jolt. He rarely received anything from Alara that wasn't a weekly order for flour or sugar. Urgent from Alara meant something truly dire. His fingers, usually so quick on the telegraph key, moved with unusual care. He sniffed the delicious aroma of fresh-baked bread, but his mind was already probing for the hidden truth. With a small, sharp knife, he carefully sliced along the bottom edge of the crust, where he knew Alara sometimes placed a special mark. His keen eyes scanned the browning surface, and there it was, a tiny, almost invisible fold, a slight bump in the golden brown. He gently peeled it back, revealing a small, thin strip of baked dough. On it, etched faintly but clearly, were the distinct patterns of Alara's code. His eyes widened, and a grim line set his mouth. "And begin." Silas's nimble fingers, practiced in the quick language of Morse code, carefully smoothed out the small strip of baked dough. His eyes, sharp and focused, traced the faint marks Alara had etched. Each dot and dash, each short line and long, translated in his mind. R-I-D-E-S-V-A-L-Y-N-V-O-I-T-E-V. The words clicked into place, cold and stark. His jaw tightened. Alara had sent the alarm. He wasted no time. With a speed that belied his calm demeanor, Silas turned to his telegraph machine. His fingers flew over the key, a rapid, rhythmic dance of metal on metal. Click-clack, click-clack. The sound filled the small office, a frantic symphony. This wasn't a casual message. It was a desperate cry for help. He sent it to the nearest militia outpost, repeating the urgent alert, ensuring it would be heard. The fate of the valley now depended on the speed of his fingers and the strength of the wire. The metallic rhythm of the telegraph key was the only sound in the office, a drumbeat of warning echoing across the wires. "And begin." The frantic clicks of Silas's telegraph key echoed far beyond his small office. The message, carried by invisible wires, reached the militia outpost like a jolt of lightning. Within minutes, the quiet barracks erupted into a flurry of activity. Men grabbed their rifles, saddled their horses, and cinched their leather tack tight. The air filled with shouts and the rhythmic thud of hooves on packed earth. Led by a grizzled captain, a column of riders galloped out of the outpost, their faces grim but determined. The sound of their horses grew louder, a powerful rumble that vibrated through the ground. Soon, the entire town could hear it, a deep, growing thunder that wasn't a storm, but something far more comforting to those who knew its meaning. The militia was riding. Their hooves pounded a fierce rhythm on the dusty road, kicking up clouds that mingled with the morning light. It was the sound of protection, of swift response, a stark contrast to the ominous quiet that had settled over the valley just moments before. The militia was coming, a wave of resolve crashing towards the impending danger. "And begin." Back at her small home, Alara stood by the window, her hands clasped tightly, watching the distant horizon. The raiders were closer now, a more defined dark smudge, their approach stirring up a dust cloud that seemed to swallow the morning light. She had done all she could. The loaf was sent, the message delivered. Now, all that was left was the agonizing wait. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the prairie grass outside, made her jump. The familiar scent of baked bread in her kitchen fell out of place, a stark contrast to the cold dread that settled deep in her bones. The air itself felt heavy, thick with unspoken fears. She imagined Silas, his focused face over the telegraph key, and the thundering hooves of the militia. Had the message reached them? Would it be fast enough? Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, echoing the imagined gallop of horses. Time stretched, each second feeling like an hour. The prairie, usually a source of comfort, now seemed vast and empty, offering no shield from the approaching storm. And begin. The distant rumble Alara had heard earlier grew into a deafening roar. Her breath caught in her throat. Suddenly, the quiet prairie was shattered by the thunder of dozens of hooves. A vast, churning cloud of red dust, thick and suffocating, rose on the horizon, eclipsing the sun. Through the haze, menacing shapes emerged. Horses and riders, a terrifying wave of dark figures, their shouts carrying on the wind. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Alara. This was not the orderly advance of the militia, but the chaotic, brutal charge of the raiders. They rode like a stampede, heedless, destructive. The dust they kicked up tasted of grit and impending doom, coating everything in a grimy film. The valley, once so peaceful, was now an arena of terror. She pressed herself against the wall, her eyes wide, watching as they tore through the open land, heading straight for the nearest homesteads. The air vibrated with their raw power, the smell of their horses and unwashed bodies of foul stench carried on the wind. Had her message been too late? End. Begin. Just as the lead raiders reached the first homestead, their menacing shouts echoing across the plains, a new sound cut through the chaos. It was the thunder of hooves, but this time it carried a different weight, a disciplined, purposeful rhythm. From the opposite direction, a line of riders appeared, not a chaotic mob, but a formation. The militia. Alara's heart leaped. They had come. They were here. The militia, their rifles glinting in the morning sun, reined in their horses, forming a solid line between the raiders and the homesteads. The dust cloud from their arrival swirled, mixing with the raiders' own. A tense silence fell, broken only by the snorting of horses and the creak of leather. Guns were drawn, barrels gleaming. The militia captain, a stern-faced man with a rifle resting easily in his hands, stared down the raider leader. It was a standoff, a moment suspended between chaos and order, destruction and defense. The air crackled with a dangerous energy, the scent of gunpowder suddenly sharper than dust. And begin. The standoff was brief but intense. The raider leader, seeing the militia's numbers and their readiness, snarled a command. There was no glory in a direct fight when outnumbered. Slowly, grudgingly, the raiders turned their horses. Their thunderous arrival became a thundering retreat, a dark, churning cloud of dust fading back towards the Badlands. They left behind only the lingering smell of fear and horse sweat, and the sudden, profound silence of the prairie. Alara watched them go, her breath held tight in her chest until the last rider vanished over the horizon. Then, a wave of immense relief washed over her, so powerful it almost buckled her knees. The tension that had gripped her for hours, for days, finally broke. Her shoulders slumped, and a shaky breath escaped her lips. The valley was safe. The militia had arrived in time. Her message had been heard. A small, tired smile touched her lips, even as the dust settled, reminding her of the danger that had just passed. End. Begin. Word spread like wildfire through the valley. The raiders had been turned away. Relief swelled into celebration. Folks poured out of their homes, shaking hands, hugging, a wave of joyful noise washing over the dust-caked land. The saloon, usually a place for quiet drinking, rang with boisterous laughter and the clinking of glasses. Amidst the cheer, a few key figures sought out Alara. Silas, his usually stoic face softened with gratitude, came directly to her door. "Alara," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "your message. It saved us all. Your cleverness, your bravery, it was nothing short of a miracle." The militia captain, a man of few words, simply nodded, a look of deep respect in his eyes. He tipped his hat. "Good work, ma'am. Real good work. Alara, unaccustomed to such direct praise, blushed slightly. She wasn't one for grand speeches or public fanfare. Her satisfaction came from knowing her silent vigil had paid off. Her loaves, more than just sustenance, had delivered salvation. She accepted their quiet thanks with a humble nod, her heart full. And begin. Later that evening, after the last echoes of celebration had faded, Alara sat by her window, looking out at the star-dusted prairie. The air was cool and calm, a stark contrast to the terror of the morning. She thought about the tiny marks hidden in the bread, the silent language she and Silas shared. It had been a small thing, a simple idea born of necessity, yet it had blossomed into the valley's salvation. Her skill, once just a private hobby, now held a new, deeper meaning. It wasn't just about codes, it was about connection, about reaching out when words failed, about protecting her home in a way no one expected. She picked up a small piece of unbaked dough, idly shaping it in her fingers. The familiar feel of it was comforting. Tomorrow, she would bake again, the smell of fresh bread filling the valley. And in every loaf, baked with love and silent watchfulness, there would be a hidden message, not of danger, but of a quiet, enduring hope, a promise of safety woven into the very fabric of their lives. Her secret wasn't just a code, it was a beacon. And begin. The next morning, the familiar routine began again. Alara, her movements steady and calm, was back in her kitchen. The oven glowed with a comforting warmth, and the scent of yeast and flour filled the air once more. She kneaded the dough with renewed purpose, each push and fold a quiet act of devotion to the peaceful rhythm of prairie life. Outside, the sun rose, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and gold. The dust from yesterday's chaos had settled, leaving the land clean and serene. A distant whinny, the gentle rustle of the wind through the tall grasses, these were the sounds that belonged to the valley. As the first batch of loaves emerged from the oven, golden and fragrant, Alara smiled. The crisis had passed, and peace, hard-won and precious, had returned. Her secret skill remained, a quiet guardian, but for now, the most important message was simply the smell of fresh bread, a warm, comforting sign that all was well on the dusty prairie. And